Check, check.
Perfect, thank you so much. My name is Rochelle Coy. I am your moderator today for this media event. Thank you so much to all the media present today. We thank you for your willingness to amplify our story here at Tk'emlúps. How today is going to work is we're going to first have a statement from our host, Tk'emlúps Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir, followed by the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Then we're going to take questions. We do only have a short window time for this media availability. We are going to have more time at the end of the event. So I just want to be clear, if those of you who may not have heard it at the beginning, this is a hybrid event. We have quite a few media outlets online. We also have quite a few media outlets here present. So how it's going to work is we're going to ask those who are present here, you're going to come to the microphone, ask you not to touch the microphone, speak into the microphone your question, first by identifying yourself and your media outlet, asking your question. There will be no follow-ups given how many people we actually have here who have questions to ask. After we take one live, we're going to then go to the chat in our Zoom, and I'm going to be reading out the question again for anybody online. You need to identify yourself, your media outlet, and your question. Again, there will be no follow-ups at this time, given the tight time constraint. So with that, I thank you very much for joining us, and I turn it now over to Tk'emlúps Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir. Kúkpi7.
Well, thank you for everyone joining us today and your willingness to amplify our truth. My intent today is to uphold the words of my ancestors of their belief that we must seek resolution to ensure the best outcomes for all. We do this because we understand that we are all interconnected, that what we do affects all of us, and what we do affects all of you. I reflect on what our past chiefs brought up when Prime Minister Sir Wilfrid Laurier back in 1910. We welcome you here, and we are glad we have met you in our country. We want you to be interested in us and to understand more fully the conditions under which we live. So long as what we consider justice is withheld from us, so long will that dissatisfaction and unrest exist among us. We will continue to struggle to better ourselves. I honor our ancestors by breathing life into a vision of a flourishing community, unrelenting in the quest for the well-being of current and future generations. I share these reflections so that you may have some understanding to the lens through which we view today. A part of our vision for a flourishing community, we are seeking a path forward. Justice for the missing children in unmarked graves in our care. Healing for Indian residential school survivors and intergenerational survivors. Further reclamation of First Nation languages, cultures, and ways of being. Since May 26th, the Tk'emlúps has carried a heavy burden when we brought forward the confirmation of the unmarked graves of missing children from the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School. These missing children, buried just a short distance from here, exemplify Indian residential school system that perpetuated mass human rights violations that might reflect criminal behavior, including and suggesting violations of humanitarian law and genocide. Welcoming Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to the Tk'emlúps today is bittersweet. When we imagined welcoming Prime Minister Trudeau to our community, It was envisioned that it would be an opportunity for him to interact with a wide array of survivors, intergenerational survivors, and many different First Nations as part of September the 30th, the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. 2 letters of invitations were sent to his office to participate in our event. For us, it was to show his commitment to rectifying the historical wrongs of residential school and to grieve with our residential school survivors, whether in person or by a virtual pre-recorded greeting and message for all of us here. Instead, in the middle of truth-telling, cultural grounding and sharing that unfolded as part of the commemoration of the very first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, in this arbor, a journalist quietly informed us that the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was on vacation in Tofino. The shock, anger, and sorrow and disbelief was palpable in our community, and it rippled throughout the world, to say the least. Today is about making some positive steps forward and rectifying a mistake. We wanted to ensure that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau visited what we refer to as a sacred site, the unmarked burial sites of the confirmed missing children from the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School. It was a long-awaited moment to receive a personal hand of recognition and sympathy regarding this horrific confirmation of unmarked graves from the Canadian head of state. I appreciate the opportunity that we had earlier today to spend time in ceremony with the Secwe, the missing. Out of deep love and respect for the missing children in our care, we refer to them as the Secwe, which means the missing in Secwépemc. Our community continues to navigate the complexities of the impacts following the horrific confirmation of the Secwe. The Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc's heart-wrenching news was the first of the wave of confirmations of unmarked graves, as other residential schools have now confirmed similar findings, with more that we know will be coming to light. We have been clear in our needs to undertake this very important work that honors the Secwe and will hopefully bring comfort to their families and their home communities. We continue to advocate for full, unfettered access to student attendance records. We also recognize the urgent need for a Secwépemc Healing Center. We need the capacity to ensure the resources and technical expertise to complete the work of identifying all the Secwe in our care, as we have only completed a small portion of the former Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School grounds. Each of these will directly contribute to the current and future well-being of our community members, and are each aspects that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has to support towards affecting real change. Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc seeks peaceful resolution to a long legacy of wrongs that were perpetuated through the Indian Residential School. In particular, we seek to bring honor and dignity to the children that were literally cast aside in unmarked burial sites. Prime Minister Trudeau, as your office just finished an election, now is the time to commit to the long road ahead to bring healing, peace, and restitution to all affected by Indian residential schools. Kukpi7.
Kukpi7, Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir. At this time, I welcome Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for his remarks.
Waitika. Thank you very much for being here today. Bonjour tout le monde. First, I want to again thank Kúkpi7 Casimir for welcoming me to Tk'emlúps Teswakmoch. I had the opportunity this morning to apologize to her and to the community in person for not having been here on September 30th. This morning we had an important and necessary conversation about how we, not just as Canadians, but as an entire country, move forward, given the reality of residential schools and the ongoing tragedy that continues to color not just our past, not just our present, but unfortunately also our future. This morning, I was reminded of sitting in the same community center, the same place that I had visited just before the election in 2015, where I first learned of the memorial presented to Wilfrid Laurier back in 1910. It sketched out a path of what wasn't called reconciliation then, but a path forward for the country that would see Indigenous and non-Indigenous people share and partner and build a better future for everyone. As we know, that was not the story of the 20th century in terms of relations with Indigenous peoples and the government. Instead, it was a story of residential schools, of kids ripped from their families, taken from their communities, prevented from learning their languages, their cultures, made to suffer neglect, loneliness, and abuse, experience from which far too many never got to return home to their families and then left instead in unmarked graves across this country. I want to salute the leadership of Kukpi7 Casimir and the Council and the knowledge keepers who tended that sacred site, who knew that there were children waiting to be found. People had heard the stories. People had seen their loved ones, their children, their cousins, their friends disappear. The truth needed to be told. So through the leadership of this community and other communities across the country, Canada has begun to face the reality of the truth of this country. That we allow kids to be taken from their language and culture, neglected and abused. And that is not just a piece of our past that we need to reflect on. It is a piece of our present. We see it in the struggles that are faced by Indigenous Canadians to a much higher degree than non-Indigenous Canadians. I am moved to see so much interest from non-Indigenous Canadians in the media and people across the country who were so shaken by the revelation of these graves. Because before we can get to reconciliation, we need to talk about truth. And the truth of what these children experienced decades and generations ago lingers today, has an impact today in systemic discrimination, in tragedies, in our cities, in our institutions, as was faced by Joyce Echaquan and so many others. The lived reality from so many Canadians of residential schools continues. And we cannot pretend that reconciliation is just about Indigenous peoples and the government, although, of course, that's an important part of it. Reconciliation is also about every single Canadian. Because every single Canadian, while residential schools were teaching Indigenous kids that they had no value, every other school was teaching non-Indigenous kids that Indigenous languages and cultures had no value. So it is upon all of us to walk this road of reconciliation together. It is on all of us to be present and to commit to the hard work that needs to be done. I am here today to say I wish I had been here a few weeks ago, and I deeply regret it. But I am here today to take the hand extended by Tk'emlúps, Secwépemc, and so many Indigenous Canadians across this country who have every reason in the world to feel pessimistic and bleak about the future, and instead choose hope. Choose to continue to be present for the hard work, ready to partner and make a better community and a better life, not just for Indigenous peoples, but for everyone who lives here. And that readiness to build and partner and work together is an inspiration to me and should be an inspiration to all Canadians as we work every day to make Canada better for everyone. Nous avons beaucoup de travail devant nous. Et je suis ici aujourd'hui et à tous les jours pour dire que nous sommes présents pour le travail et que nous sommes profondément reconnaissants au leadership des peuples autochtones de ce pays qui continuent de croire et de travailler en un monde meilleur pour tous, malgré tous les défis qu'ils ont vécus au cours des décennies et des générations. Nous avons du travail à faire et nous allons le faire. Thank you very much for being here today. Kúkpi7.
Merci infiniment, Premier Ministre Justin Trudeau. Thank you, Kúkpi7 to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. At this time, we're going to go to questions. As I said, for media present that is over here to the left, the line can start over here. While we're getting media coming to the microphone, I'm going to go first online. The first question is from Dylan Robertson of the Winnipeg Free Press with a question for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. First Nations bands in Manitoba say that they have spent months trying to access federal dollars for burial sites research. The Crown Indigenous Relations Department said just 9 groups have access to funding, even though 58 have submitted applications and another 117 have inquired about the funding. Is this process going fast enough for you, or will you put more resources to help the communities access this funding? Prime Minister?
This process is unbelievably important. Before we can get to reconciliation, we need to get to truth. We need families be able to grieve and to heal. And to do that, we need to support them in every way we can. We have put forward resources, millions of dollars, and we'll continue to work with every and any community to make sure they have the resources necessary to do what they need to do, to identify, to recover, to grieve, and to heal. I know that requests have been coming in from across the country, and Ministry of Indigenous Services has been working extremely hard to deliver those necessary resources, and as I've said, we will be there with as much as is necessary to be able to get closure and to move forward right across the country.
Kukpi7 will now go to the microphone. Please identify yourself, your full name, and your media outlet. Again, only one question, no follow-ups, and we will cut you off. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ben Milger. I'm with CTV News Vancouver. Kúkpi7 Casimir, thank you for inviting us here to witness this important meeting. Prime Minister Trudeau, leaders demonstrate their priorities through their actions, and then it's up to people to decide if what they see reflects their own values. With that in mind, what do your actions on September 30th say to Indigenous people in this country who are yearning for a leader who can move forward with meaningful reconciliation?
Thank you. As I said, I deeply regret not having been here to commemorate and to move forward with the Tk'emlúps Secwépemc. It is something that we need to commit ourselves to do better on every single day as a government, and me as an individual. Over the past 6 years, we have developed an approach in partnership with Indigenous peoples that has led to many improved outcomes, from ending 118 long-term boil water advisories to delivering new and refurbished classrooms for tens of thousands of kids across the country. But there is so much more to do. And we will always be there to do that work. And I am deeply grateful to Kúkpi7 Casimir for having welcomed me here today to listen to survivors, to learn, to commit myself to work forward. After September 30th, she could have chosen to turn her back on me and on the federal government. The community could have said, you know what, we don't need to deal with you anymore. And yet, she reached out. She said, please come and listen and learn, and we will walk this path together, and that is why I'm here.
Thank you, and I'm going to go to a question from the chat. So it's from Raisa Patel from the Toronto Star with a question for Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir. The flags on the federal buildings, including Parliament Hill, were lowered to half-mast to honor the discovery, and actually we say confirmation, of the unmarked graves in Tk'emlúps. The Prime Minister has said those flags will remain at half-mast until Indigenous communities believe they should be raised again. When do you believe it would be appropriate to raise the flags, and what will it represent to you when they are? Kukpi7 Casimir.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that question in regards to the flags being half-mast. To us, it was an absolute honor to know that we had the support and the unity of our non-Indigenous government entities wanting to do that, to signify the honor that they have for our unmarked graves and the children that didn't make it home. I know in speaking with and had some shared reflections with our 13 grassroots family members, and it was shared today, and with our council as well, and our members that were in attendance, and with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this morning, that September 30th would be a date that we would want to ensure that is truly honored every year, for those flags to be half-mast, to honor all the children across the whole nation, and honor those children in those unmarked graves, and honor those families who did not have their children come home. So I know that with that, that is what we see.
Kukpi7 Casimir, go to the microphone. No, it's not on yet.
Are we on now? There we go. Alison Hurst, CTV National News. Prime Minister, this is for you. You called previously to apologize to Kukpi Casimir, and you're here today again to apologize. But they've been very clear. They want commitment and they want action, not just an apology. So do you believe that the community has accepted this apology?
First of all, I think it's important to understand that words do matter, and that with an apology, recognizing the harm that was caused is important and is a first step towards healing, towards restitution, towards doing right. But it's not just about words. It's also about actions. That's why I was pleased to confirm to Kukpi and the community that we will continue to work together on important issues, whether it's the healing center that this community has been asking for a long time, certainly needs in a consequence of the discovery of the unmarked graves, or an elders lodge, or designation of historic sites, or working together to make sure we're finding answers. These are all concrete actions as we move forward on commemorating and investing in a museum, making sure that we're supporting the language and the culture that has caused the strength and the vibrancy of this community for generations, despite the efforts of previous governments to eradicate them. These are all actions that we remain committed to, and this is the conversation we had today.
Thank you. Am I live? Hello? Hello again? Can you hear me? Yes, there we go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kukpi7 Prime Minister. We're going to go to a question from the chat. It's David Atkins, Global News, and it's for Prime Minister, Global News Ottawa. Prime Minister, has your government had a chance to decide as to whether it will drop any further appeals on the case involving the human rights tribunal payment orders for First Nations children placed in foster homes / Jordan's Principle?
This is an extremely important question, and I want to be clear on where we stand and where we have stood for the past few years. Kids who were removed from their communities into care in the provincial system, who suffered, deserve compensation. And this government will be compensating them. There is no question about that. But at the same time as we do that, we need to make sure that we are also moving forward to make sure that today and tomorrow and next year and in 10 years, kids at risk no longer are removed from their communities, from their culture, from their language. That they are able to be supported within their communities, in their identity. That was the essence of Bill C-92 that we passed, that we co-developed with Indigenous leaders across this country, and that we're moving forward on implementing right across the country in the ways that are suited to each community, to each nation. That's the path we need to walk. Not only do we need to compensate for the past, we need to make sure we're preventing the need for compensation because we're removing the harms and the injustices in the present and into the future. And our government will continue to do both those things. We will compensate and we will move forward. In regards to the specific ruling, we are consulting with Indigenous partners and leaders. We are looking at the implications of the actual decision, and we will be making an announcement around that in due course. But we will be compensating those kids who suffered from removal from care, and we will be making sure that this harm to kids at risk ceases.
Kukpi7 Prime Minister, we'll go to the floor for a question.
Prime Minister Trudeau, Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir with Global News. Thank you both for your remarks this morning. My question goes to Prime Minister Trudeau. We are here just a few weeks after a snap election that Indigenous leaders across BC have told us they felt took attention away from advancing reconciliation and was not made as much of a priority as they felt it should have been during that campaign. Here you are again with a re-elected minority government. A few hours after, in Hazelton, BC last night, Indigenous chiefs, matriarchs, and family members stopped a social worker from taking a 6-year-old child into foster care away from their family. With those commitments that you just reinforced moments ago, I think it's fair to ask ahead of November 22nd when Parliament meets again, what concrete timelines and funding examples can you give that will be committed to stopping what lawyers have called modern-day residential schools?
No, thank you for that question. We're here today to commemorate and remember the 215 plus kids who attended residential school just up the hill from here over the past many decades and generations, and who were never returned to their families. And indeed, to note the kids across the country from Indigenous communities who suffered the same fates. And as you point out, the current practice that has gone on in provinces across the country for many years of taking kids at risk in Indigenous communities out of those communities to raise them in foster homes where they're not surrounded by language, they're not surrounded by their traditional cultural learnings, they're not surrounded by members of their communities, they're not taught by their elders, is unacceptable. And is an example of this country not understanding the lessons, the horrific lessons of residential schools. That's why 3 years ago as a government, we sat down with Indigenous leadership from across this country and co-developed legislation called C-92 on child and family services to make sure that Indigenous communities would have the resources, the abilities to keep kids who are at risk in their communities, to raise them in their languages, to keep them safe, but keep them grounded in the identity that would be so important for them for the rest of their lives. Now, it has been 3 years since we worked on that, and we have begun signing agreements. The first one, notably, was with Kúkpi7 First Nation in Saskatchewan, where following the lead of Tk'emlúps, unmarked graves were found. We are in discussion with communities like this one to make sure that we are able to give them the resources and that they are able to set up the right framework for them to keep their kids safe and supported properly. As a government, we are there for that, and we continue to work with the communities at their pace as they develop the system that is right for them, because this is a system that no one can afford to get wrong, and that's why it needs to be centered and informed by the leadership, the parents, and the members of the communities who will be supporting these kids in generations to come.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm going to take one last question at this time, and that will be online. So everybody in the lineup here, I regret that we do not have further time at this time. Just a reminder to everybody, both here present in the media as well as online, we're going to live stream the event for those who are online. We're going to come back at the very end of this event to take some comments and some more questions. So the final question I have here for this point in time is from Xiaoyi Li from the City News National Desk in Ottawa with a question for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is often expected to set an example for all Canadians, and many Canadians were likely looking for some guidance on how someone ought to conduct themselves on September 30th. Are you concerned about the message that your absence that day may have set for individual Canadians? Prime Minister?
I have many regrets about September 30th and my decision to travel. The first, of course, was not being able to attend the commemorations here that were so important for the entire country in awakening people to the reality of residential schools, but also to be able to grieve with the community that since May has been hurting and reliving past trauma in a way that I should have been here. But I also regret that my choice on the 30th overshadowed the event that we held on the 29th on the Hill, where the National Council for Truth and Reconciliation came together with elders and survivors who shared their stories, and for the first time ever raised the national flag of truth and reconciliation on Parliament Hill. It was a moment of deep significance for those who attended. I was privileged to be part of that. Unfortunately, it was overlooked because of a decision that I made that I shouldn't have made. Instead of talking about truth and reconciliation, people talked about me, and that's on me. I take responsibility for that. But in the conversations I had with survivors that day and the night before, I experienced and re-experienced both the sorrow and loss that survivors have felt, the sense of worthlessness that residential schools were designed to impart upon Indigenous children. And I also witnessed, and witness every time I speak with survivors, the extraordinary strength of spirit of Indigenous peoples who continue to believe and to commit themselves to building a better future for their own community and for everyone who shares this land. And that always leaves me humbled and inspired. And on September 30th, where going forward, Canada will always lower its flags to half-mast, and where we will always fly the flag of truth and reconciliation designed by the National Council of Truth and Reconciliation, there will be an opportunity for all Canadians, non-Indigenous Canadians, to reflect on the country we live in, the actions that have led to the present day, but also the future we need to build together.
Kukpi7, thank you very much, Prime Minister. At this time, as I had indicated just prior to that last online question, unfortunately, that's all the questions that we can take at this time. We're now going to go more to the public event, and for that, for all media present, we're appreciated that you need to look after your cameras during this media time, but we're going to ask now that you please disperse so that people in the stands can see, because right now you're blocking everybody's view. Also, just a gentle reminder that we do have a screen over here for people to watch. We will be live streaming this on Facebook. This is also being live streamed through our video account. And for the media online, we will be now going over to our live stream event as well, so you're able to follow along. Again, if you didn't hear already, our AV person is Mike at Lee's Music. He put his email in the chat, so for any media looking for audio or video from today's event, please email him directly with your request. Again, I'm going to say it one more time for everybody standing. If you could please disperse into the stand so that people can see and be able to fully participate in today's event. Kukpi7, everybody, for participating in this media event. I'm now going to hand it over to our MC once we get everybody seated, and we're going to go on to our main event. Thank you.
Holy, look at how tall she is. Hold this in.
As is our way, I introduce myself in our language. Following our cultural protocols, I must also, for the elders present, let them know who my grandparents and parents are. In Ka'achas Quest, Ted Gottfredson Sr. Following our cultural protocols, I must also, for the elders present, let them know who my grandparents and parents are. In Ka'achas Quest, Ted Gottfredson Sr. to Tk'emlúps Tlakwas, Evelyn Gottfredson as Quests ni Thomas Nkicha to Tk'emlúps Tlakwas Al. Lyn Chpa'a L's Quests, Gus Gottfredson Sr. to Tk'emlúps Tlakwas, Al Squai Thomas to Tk'emlúps Tlakwas Al. As Quests Lyn Ki'a, Mildred Gottfredson, ni Manuel to Tk'emlúps Tlakwas, as Lizzie Thomas, ni Lampro to Simch Tlakwas. Chuchmintelman at Tk'emlúps Mchutluch, na Secwépemc Chochwai to Stetlachem, Chochwai to Kukpi, Chochwai to Kalmuch, and Chochwai to Kuselktens. The cacao is Tlakwas, las Wikelman Pinta Seedkt. I'd also like to introduce my Slimkekelt, Emma.
White Hohoitip, Emma Gottfredson in Squex, La Tk'emlúps. I will also introduce my parents and my grandparents. My Mabel Grant ni Thomas Squests in Kia'a, John Grant Squests in Chpa'a, Evelyn Gottfredson Squests in Kia'a, Ted Gottfredson Sr. Squests in Chpa'a to Tk'emlúps Equus, Ted Gottfredson Sr. Squests in Ka'acha to, oh yeah, Ted Gottfredson Jr. Squests in Ka'acha to Tk'emlúps Equus, Sharon Gottfredson ni Grant Squests in Kicha to Tk'emlúps Equus, Kúkpi7.
Yes, Kúkpi7 Emma. I would like to mention that Emma, along with a core group of youth, have undertaken the responsibility of learning Secwépemc in our first ever Tk'emlúps Secwépemc language immersion program. They started just after September, and as you can see, there's been a lot of growth already. They've been working very hard in their acquisition of Secwépemc. Yes, Kúkpi7. At this time, as following Secwépemc law, it is our responsibility to welcome guests into our territory. So I'd like to ask the Language and Culture Department to please come to the front. So at this time, we're going to sing the traditional Secwépemc welcome song. Some of the ladies will perform the traditional welcome dance that accompanies the song. Okay, all right. Okay. Go ahead, Sunny. Yes, Kukpi7. Okay, so we have some housekeeping items that we need to mention. Unfortunately for today, the washrooms have been winterized, which means the water has been blown out, flushed, or whatever they do to winterize the washroom. So that means we have porta potties available. Sorry about that. Outside where you first came in, there are some hot beverages and snacks available for anybody who would like to have some. Emma, you want to? We're right here.
For anybody that may need it, there are mental health and traditional supports available. There's also the media present and live streaming of the event for anybody that could not make it. It's live streamed on Facebook. I don't know.
Okay, sure. And as you can see to our right, the shoe journey installation. It's a portable shoe journey, and it is a memorial to the 200 plus children that were confirmed here in Tk'emlúps at our residential school. These 200 plus pairs of children's shoes travel to places of accountability. The shoe journey was founded by a group of local mothers after the graves of the 215 plus were uncovered or confirmed in May of 2021 in Tk'emlúps, the Secwépemc. This memorial creates the space for awareness, reconciliation, and an opportunity to provide a voice for the children that never made it home from the residential school legacy. The shoe journey has traveled within Tk'emlúps, to the Kamloops Courthouse, to local churches, and to the doorsteps of Kamloops City Hall. Each pair of shoes displayed represents an innocent life lost to this residential school. Each child is mourned by their family and their community. Each family torn apart by unspeakable tragedy. These children lost their voices years ago. We will never stop speaking for them. We will never stop demanding justice. We will remember the 215 plus children. So at this time, I would like, back in July 2015, well-respected elder Mona Jules said a prayer for the children. I know that our elders say these prayers from the heart, but I believe that this prayer captures everything that is significant to us here today. Our prayers for the lost ones. Translated by Mona Jules, Diane Sandy, Leona Calhoun, Daniel Calhoun, Roger Porter, Connie Jules, Flo Sampson, Marie Antoine, and Bertha Thomas. Transcribed by Julianne Walshaw and Jessica Arnous. Good morning, all my relatives. We will pray for the children today. Our relatives are becoming very, very pitiful. They have found their grandchildren. The children that are lying out there across the land. They have been found. What could we possibly do? Help all the remaining children living in this country on this land. Help them. Help them to try very hard and to put all their energy into it for them to be strong as they go forward. Peen Wulma Yaus Kalt Kukpi, now and forever, Creator. Knukunta Tetlakwis Natimich, Miaus is Westes Hohuaitis Waachs, Ach Kultans, Ach Kultans, Wat Stemis. Help them as they go forward, as they carry out all of their future work in the language, cultural knowledge, and whatever may be. Ma Elkstmans, Ma Yawilkmans, Matchquinstas atlanis achilmis. They will work at it. They will work hard at it. No matter what happens, they will hang on to it. Geld Kukpi. Tjekta de chtluktens as chmemelt to waachpin. Creator, light their way, the path of the children who are still with us still. Knukuntas chmemelt te takspel statlachems, kwakt titate. Help the children that have no parents, the ones crying out in hunger. Knukuntat geld Kukpi as spulk eelkmuntum as sweet statlechem. Ksein to swachs. Creator, help the parents to come back to them, for them to stop their bad behavior. Geld Kukpi. Knukunta chochwai testimonials nischochuyuluchum zakalmuch utluch. Creator, help all the children throughout all native lands. Knukunta testimonial to chmol nischochwai the residential school to chmetstem. Help the children that are lying out there at the so-called residential schools. Knukunta testimonial as taus quyus mischuchum wusis waachus aquactus nisitist newton school. Help the children to never suffer again, for them not to cry out at night over at the school. Kalt Kukpi, Kchichta Tk'emlúps as ulchs, as laas as waachus. Peen, wulmat yaus. Creator, open the doors for them. Allow them to enter to be at peace now and forever. Kalt Kukpi, Yes Pakal Chin Manchin. Creator, I am asking you humbly. Amen. Okay, so I'd like to thank the folks who came up and sang the welcome song. I'd like to thank everyone who has come out today. It's a beautiful day. I'm glad that we didn't do this last week. It would have been definitely a lot colder. So at this time, I'd like to call Assembly of First Nations National Chief Rosanne Archibald and Secwépemc Nation Tribal Chief Chair Kukpi Wayne Christian to the stage. So while we're waiting for them to come up, I just wanted to mention that, you know, I did talk a little bit about the Secwépemc welcome song. For us, it's a way to let everyone know that the events coming are peaceful, that all are welcome, and that we're all here to do good work and to be with one another.
Okay. Who's speaking first, myself or Rosanne, our National Chief?
Sorry, National Chief Rosanne Archibald, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Miigwech. I am accompanied by BCAFN Regional Chief Terry Teegee, and I'd like to cede a little bit of my time because this is his region. So I wanted to just give him a couple of minutes before me to acknowledge that he works with all the First Nations here in BC and is an important voice. So I'll give you a couple of minutes, Regional Chief Teegee.
Thank you. Deneza, Zekuza, Skiza. Just want to acknowledge Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc and the territory that I am a guest here. And I just want to state to the Prime Minister that once again, we as Indigenous peoples here in this country, we acknowledge and are respectful of the commitments that we heard here today, but I think we're beyond theatrics, platitudes, and words. And as stated by many Indigenous peoples in this country, we need to see action. And whether it's providing records for our Indigenous children that are yet to be found, or moving ahead for the resources for healing centers here in Tk'emlúps and elsewhere in this province and this country, is what is needed to realize that we're on a healing journey. And it's not just for Indigenous peoples, it's for this country, that we see a better future for all of us. And I thank you, National Chief, for attending this event, and Prime Minister, thank you for being here. And this is your third election, so your third chance, if you will. And as you stated in 2015, it was the most important relationship. And we heard it, the commitments again in 2019 and here again in 2021. So actions speak louder than words. So we want to see action, and I thank you all. Thank you to Tk'emlúps, the survivors here, residential school survivors and intergenerational. Masicho.
Cooks Jackson for that, and you know, welcome all of you here. So good to see you, and truly honored to have you here sitting up with us today. So I'll jump back into our agenda and start off with some opening remarks. And so as Kúkpi7 Casimir, and on behalf of my council, membership, survivors, grassroots, family representatives, and our Secwe, the missing, we welcome you, Prime Minister Trudeau, to Tk'emlúps of Secwépemc. We also want to recognize and welcome Minister Mark Miller, who's also attended today with us as well. And these are our direct unceded ancestral lands, and we are known for where the rivers meet. We are truly thankful for the Tk'emlúps members who were able to join us here today. I extend a heartfelt appreciation to the Indian residential school survivors and intergenerational survivors that are present. I also acknowledge the many First Nation leaders who are also able to join us today to come and bear witness with all of us. We thank you for helping us uphold the custom of bearing witness. It is very important and is an integral part of history making. I want to thank you. Many thanks to the Assembly of First Nations and our first appointed female to the National Chair for the AFN. We're truly honored to have you here with us today. Also to our Shuswap Nation Tribal Chair, Kukpi7 Christian as well, who's supported us. And also I want to recognize Regional Terry TG. I want to acknowledge him as well for all the work that he's been working, alongside, Tk'emlúps, advocating and supporting and being there. And, it's a very tough road, and you need all the support that you can get. And I also want to acknowledge Kukpi Judy Wilson, who's here, representing UBCIC and the Leadership Council. Her advocation has been, absolutely appreciated, and want to acknowledge her for that as well. And also to the many chiefs that I've also seen out there and who are here from the many communities throughout Secwépemc and throughout BC. And I know we also have representation from the Okanagan as well, and many of the nations as well who are here to support us. So my warmest appreciation and thanks to all of you. And I also want to acknowledge all of my council, Councillor Sonny Leonard, Councillors Justin Gottfredson, Councillor Thomas Blank, Councillor Jeanette Jules, Councillor Katie Gottfredson, and Councillor Marie Baptiste. I wouldn't be up here without their support and strength that they've been giving me ever since May 27th. So I really want to hold my hands up to them and their support. think back to just a few short weeks ago, to the last time that we gathered in this arbor as part of a healing journey. We planned an event here to honor the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. We came together to recognize Indian residential school survivors, intergenerational survivors, and the very real continued impacts of the federally mandated Indian residential school systems. This year, we are especially aware of the harms of Indian residential schools as we brought forward the confirmation of the unmarked graves of missing children from the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School. Out of deep love and respect for these children in our care, we refer to them as the Secwe, the missing, in Secwépemc. Secwe, the missing, exemplify Indian residential school system that perpetuated mass human rights violations that might reflect criminal behavior, including suggesting violations of humanitarian law and genocide. Our community continues to navigate the complexities of the impacts following the horrific confirmation of the Secwe. The Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc's heart-wrenching news was the first of the wave of confirmations of unmarked graves across the country, and now have confirmed several more findings, with thousands more lives coming to light. When we imagined welcoming you, Prime Minister Trudeau, to our country, which is the Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc, this is our country, this is our home, it was in a way that would be an opportunity to interact with a wide array of survivors, intergenerational survivors from many, many First Nations as part of the September 30th, the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And we know that at any given time, there was up towards 500 students that attended KIRS here just before us, reflecting that those students were not only from here within our Tk'emlúps, but throughout the nation and BC and into the States and in Alberta as well. So for us, it was to show your commitment to rectifying the historical wrongs of residential school and to give residential school survivors, whether in person or by virtual presentation, and a greeting to recognize and honor that day. So in the middle of the truth-telling, cultural grounding and sharing that unfolded as part of the commemoration of the very first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, a journalist quietly informed us that you were on vacation in Tofino. So for all of us, it was the shock, the anger, and sorrow, and disbelief was palpable in our community and rippled around the world. Today is about making some positive steps and rectifying some missed steps. To shape this agenda, there was a discussion with the Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc Council and grassroots representatives, as well as with elders in our Language and Culture Department. And I also appreciated the insight provided by our Tribal Chair, Kukpi7 Christian, our BC Regional Terry TG, and APTN National Chief Rosanne Archibald. So Prime Minister Trudeau, thank you for making this a first step and making amends regarding September the 30th. Coming to the Tk'emlúps to witness and recognize our collective history, meeting with survivors and hear them speak their truths about Indian residential schools. We have a responsibility, and despite any could haves, should haves, we want to have your commitment to continue walking with us and resetting that path forward and work with us in good faith. I appreciate the time that you took this morning to participate in ceremony and to connect with the Secwe, the missing, and pay your respects at the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School Memorial and our sacred site. Reconciliation starts with real action. real action that supports healing, the revitalization of First Nations languages, culture, traditions, and nose of Wayne. So Prime Minister Trudeau, to be clear, Tk'emlúps seeks to establish a process for ongoing commitment with the Canadian government to develop capacity, be it Tk'emlúps or any other communities grappling with their findings. We need practical supports within our communities and the resources to undertake this very important work. This is a long process that will take significant time and resources. We've only just begun. We require your support to ensure that full and complete disclosure of records that are held by the Canadian government and the Church, specifically the student attendance records that were created by institutions that administered the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So as we have said before, and we will continue to advocate for, these primary documents currently within the custody of the Canadian government are of critical importance to identify the Liskway, the missing children. Every student who ever attended Kamloops Indian Residential School is documented in those records. So thus we call upon you, Prime Minister Trudeau and the Canadian government to share those documents, those attendance records, as a first step in assisting Tk'emlúps fulfilling their obligation regarding those lost without acknowledgement, and so that the families can get the resolution and the peace that they deserve. We also require a commitment for capacity to develop at the Tk'emlúps Healing Center to support our survivors and intergenerational survivors. This would benefit Tk'emlúps, the Secwépemc communities, as well as all those that want to participate in the healing programs and how the residential school has affected them. With the findings at the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School, survivors have been triggered over and over and are overwhelmed with the sadness and the grief and the anger. And even those who have made great progress on their healing journey have suffered a setback. I've most recently also heard that even seeing on the news is re-triggering, that's a funny word, it's like entrepreneur, re-triggering each time. And it's painful, it's re-traumatizing. An Indigenous healing center in Kamloops would address this mental health crisis and offering healing programs for survivors, intergenerational trauma healing, family healing, and grief and loss healing, amongst other types of programs. So we call upon you, Prime Minister Trudeau and the Canadian government, for a commitment to fund the Kamloops Healing Center so that tangible progress towards meaningful reconciliation can happen. In closing, I would like to affirm to the world and you, Prime Minister Trudeau, that we are mapping out a journey of healing and collaboration. I think back to the letter by our ancestors to then Prime Minister Sir Wilfrid Laurier in 1910. The Secwépemc and neighboring First Nations sought peaceful resolution to how we collectively interact and govern. Tk'emlúps, the Secwépemc seeks peaceful resolution to a long legacy of wrongs that were perpetuated through the Indian Residential School. In particular, we seek to bring honor and dignity to children that were literally cast aside in unmarked burial sites. Prime Minister Trudeau, now is a time to commit to the long road ahead, to bring healing, peace, and restitution to all those that are affected by residential schools. And to all Canadians, I call upon you to step up as we need to ensure justice and accountability happens in the long term. And we need to continue to work together so that everyone First Nations and non-First Nations will acknowledge and come to terms with these truths so that we may collectively heal. That is when reconciliation will start. That is a path that we must be on in unity and solidarity for our children. Kukpi7.
I'd like to say Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir, as well as Kukpi7 National Chief Rosanne Archibald. I would now like to call upon the Secwépemc Nation Tribal Council Chair, Kukpi Wayne Christian, to provide some remarks.
So I'm going before you?
I guess I'm going after you.
Hello everyone. Tk'emlúps Quest, Kúkpi7. I'm also one of the tribal chiefs of the Secwépemc Nation. Tk'emlúps. I hope I pronounced it right. It's the missing. We're here today, and it's beyond belief to me. I was looking around and there was more media and security than there were people here a while back. And that's kind of, in some ways, the visit of the Prime Minister today, and for a lot of people, there's lots of anger, so they're not here. And you can see it on Facebook if you track what's going on. The way Canada has treated our people in such a way that the anger and the frustration is hard to swallow. So when I was coming here early this morning, I was thinking, what am I going to say? And I thought, no, I'll just talk to my mom. Because my mom went to this institution. And I would say to my mom, hey, Mom, May 27th of this year, 2021, the children uttered these words to the world. You found us. You found us. Because my mom was a child when she attended this institution. And so my words this morning are for all of you that went to these institutions. Because my mom, she could not talk about the residential school. As if you can imagine, my family, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren are asking about their grandmother. Did she attend? And I can tell them yes, but she never spoke about the atrocities that she experienced as a child. And I think of my mom as all the survivors of these institutions, as a mother, and how she warriored up here and survived this institution so she could give me life. So thank yourselves, all you survivors, for the work that you did, the hard work you did to survive the genocide of Canada against us. The genocide. We are here because every man, woman, and child, mother and father, grandmother, grandfather, aunt and uncle, you warriored up. You survived over 100 years of this institution. We're still here. We're still here. And I'm probably the only person on this stage that had an interaction with the Prime Minister's father here in Kamloops. Some of you would remember the Constitution Express and what we did when we traveled across the country to Ottawa, then New York, and a year later to 7 different countries in Europe, and finally to the Queen, talking about nation-to-nation relationships. So when this young man stood up and from the podium in Ottawa talked about the most important relationship is with us, and it's a nation-to-nation relationship, I could not believe what I heard. Our ancestors and our people have been fighting this for centuries. So when this man stood up and did those and said those things, it gave me hope. It gave many of our people hope. But were they just words? A lot of you are seeing the actions of this government. And as the regional chief said, actions speak louder than words. And so we're calling upon you, Prime Minister, to take some action. Your Reconciliation Minister's Cabinet Committee, invite some survivors into that group so you can educate your cabinet on the real atrocities of Canada. Listen to our people. Because that's one thing that happened when those young children spoke up to the world. There are survivors in my community that never ever spoke about their experience. And they said, this is a final piece. They hear us now. They can hear us. So this morning, Prime Minister, you talked about us doing the hard work. I would say, no, you need to do the hard work. And your cabinet needs to do the hard work. We've been working because we have unceded lands. We have everything that was here for us was taken from us by law. Legislative genocide. The Indian Act, it still exists today. Everything that was ours, that these institutions took, our language, our songs, our ceremonies, our dances, they took the land, the Tk'emlúps, they took the water, and they treated us as less than human. Those of you that know the stories of these places know how our people were treated. Humiliated and shaved their heads, deloused, and given a number and not a name. I'm 60,238.01. That's my number. But that's not who I am. I am a Secwépemc man. I am a Secwépemc grandfather. And I tell you this, my mother and all the survivors, I thank you, Mom. I thank you, I thank you, I thank you. And all your relatives, my aunts and uncles, I thank you all for doing what you needed to do to ensure that we survived. Because our lands are unceded. We have no treaties with Canada. That's why the memorial is so important of 1910. It lays out a nation-to-nation relationship. And it's built on the law of K'núchantwach. K'núchantwach, helping each other. In Secwépemc, our words are not passive, they're active. So when we say K'núchantwach, we actually do something. So I'm asking you, Prime Minister, K'núchantwach, let's help each other, do something. In the next 100 days, and as your cabinet comes to be in this next Monday, do something concrete. It's really important. The second word, Prime Minister, that you need to learn and understand is K'núchantchut, which means help yourself. If you're going to help us, you need to help yourself. You have a mother still, and today I learned it was your father's birthday and your eldest son's birthday today. You have a family. It was not tore apart by some laws of this country. So you're no different than us. You're just a man, you're a human being, you make mistakes, I get that. You carry the weight of this country on your shoulders. And all we're saying is let's work together. Let's help each other. You know, that's what we have to do, Prime Minister. And so for all you people that are here, the survivors, take care of yourself, because this is horrific stuff that you were triggered into. Memories, your actions and the way you're acting, it's horrific. I ask you to look after yourself. Use the things that our ancestors used to heal: the water, the mountains, the scalia, the bumin, the chichinum, quachuchin. Use those things. Everything they took from us, use it to regain who you are. Secwépemc yuyot. Secwépemc yuyot. Means Secwépemc strong. It's who we are. That's why we have such a large territory, why they invaded and used these schools in our territory to take our children hostage and commit genocide upon us. So I hope, Prime Minister, that you take these words, and use them and make them active for Canada and for us. We want to work with you. Plain and simple. We don't always agree, but we will work with you. Because I was here in 2015, and it's unfortunate I'm still here, so you can't get rid of me that easy. So Kukpi7, I want to thank Kukpi Rosanne and the Kúkpi7 and all of the Tk'emlúps. You know, you're a strong people here. It happened here for a reason, Tk'emlúps. I want to tell you that. It happened here for a reason. You're strong people. Remember that. They've done everything to try to kill us off, but they didn't. We're here. And that happened here because the strength of the Secwépemc nation is right here. I want to say that to you as one of the Secwépemc people. You're strong. We're going to stand with you. We'll stand with your survivors. We'll stand with the chief and council. We'll stand with you until we get to a point of where we can heal ourselves. That's what we need. And thank you again for listening to me today. Kukpi7.
Yes, Kúkpi7. At this time, I'd like to ask Kukpi Rosanne Archibald to say a few words. And my apologies, I skipped ahead in the agenda. My apologies, Kukpi. There's two Rosannes up there, and you put Kukpi Rosanne twice, and I'm like, whoops, my bad. So now we have National Chief Kukpi Rosanne Archibald.
Amigos, Wachiemisoy, Okamakane, Okamakane Shishik, Geshehak, Iskoiwak, Nishtra, Oshkaniwak. Rosanne Archibald, Natishnikasa, Dagotagamoshnikatelko. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to acknowledge the Creator, the world around us, and our place within it. I am honored to be here today on Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc traditional territory. And I acknowledge all of you who are watching online on your traditional lands. I want to lift up Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc Kúkpi7 Rosanne Casimir, her council, AFN BC Regional Chief Terry Tiji, Shuswap Nation Tribal Council Kukpi Wayne Christian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Judy Wilson, and I also saw Chief Lee Spahan. I know there are others out there, and I hope I get a chance to say hello to you before I leave. I also want to acknowledge the elders, Mark Miller, and all the dignitaries and special guests that are here today. Most importantly, I want to acknowledge the Tk'emlúps survivors and the intergenerational trauma survivors who are joining us here in person, and all of the survivors that are joining us online. I want to particularly say miigwech to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for being here and for meeting this morning with survivors and listening to their stories. These are very difficult times for our survivors and our intergenerational trauma survivors. Old hurts and trauma are being triggered as we recover our little ones from the institutions of assimilation and genocide. I no longer call them schools because no school I ever went to had a graveyard. What is hopeful in this moment is that it can serve as a turning point in our collective healing journey as we build the healing path forward together. And ceremony must be the foundation of that healing path. I am learning as I travel throughout the BC region many traditional and cultural protocols that we must all honor as visitors and guests to other nations' lands. So for my part, I always bring sacred medicines with me as a gift to leadership that I visit. I'm now going to just take a moment to hand those 4 medicines to Kukpi Rosanne, Kukpi Wayne, BCAFN Regional Chief, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. These medicines that I've just handed out are our bond, our connection. They are sacred and they signal that we will walk the healing path forward together in a good way. The key part of our work together is that we change behaviors and we take concrete actions rather than empty words and empty, hollow apologies. I am present at this event at the invitation of Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir. This is my 3rd visit, and I'm here because our babies are buried here. Let me say that again. Our babies are buried here. Our children, our little ones, they deserve justice. They deserve ceremony. And above all else, they deserve the dignity to be named and either ceremonially or physically return to their homelands. And these little ones here in Secwépemc territory are not the only ones. That's why I'm here. Thousands of our children are buried across Turtle Island. And I will travel to as many of those former institutions of assimilation and genocide to offer tobacco and prayers for healing. I will also continue to call for accountability. Someone must be charged for the deaths of our children. And there must be examination to determine if some of our children were murdered. Canada must be held accountable for their genocidal laws and policies. Canada must not be allowed to investigate itself. We need an international special rapporteur, as called by the AFN Chiefs in Assembly, appointed through the United Nations to impartially investigate these matters properly. The bottom line is, our children were and are deeply loved and cared for by their families and their communities. For their sake, for the sake of our little ones, we must continue to speak the truth, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable it makes us. Every child matters. It is everyone's responsibility to acknowledge the truth before reconciliation, and I heard the Prime Minister say that in his earlier comments. The truth is that the child welfare system continues to take our children from their families and communities. Many of our children today are also dying in the child welfare system. Here's another truth. Canada is founded upon the genocide of our children and families. This myth of friendly Canada has been shattered. We must all now pick up the pieces together and construct a truthful story about our painful shared history. The days of empty rhetoric are over. I have here a 2-page document. It's called the Healing Path Forward Accord that I'm going to present to the Prime Minister. This accord provides strategic direction and action toward evolutionary and positive change in this country for First Nations people. There are 3 components to this framework: equality and equity for First Nations. Those are basic things like clean drinking water, enough housing, adequate housing, quality housing, those basic issues. We need the second thing to establish a proper political process with the federal government. And number 3, we've been talking about this since the beginning. We have to implement, recognize, and respect our inherent and treaty rights. That has to happen in Canada. So let's make today the beginning of a new chapter in this country, where a vision that we all share becomes real, where our children are healthy and happy, surrounded by the love and care of their families, living in safe and vibrant communities. There is a healing path forward, and we will get there by working together. Ninanaskamon, Gisakitin, Ninanaskamon in my language means I am grateful, I am thankful, I thank you. Gisakitin means I love you.
Here's Kukpi Rosanne Archibald. Up next, I would like to invite Elder Charlotte Manuel, her daughter Vicky Manuel, and Vicky's daughter Ashley Michelle to the front. These are a residential school survivor and 2 intergenerational trauma survivors. At this time, while they come to the front, I would like to remind people that there are mental and traditional supports available. I don't know where, I seen Steve Basil, he's right there. Can you raise your hand, Steve? He's in the black cowboy hat, pretending he doesn't hear me. There he is, Eagle fan. Dave Archie, can you put up there's Dave Archie as well. We also have Hilda Green. And is there someone else with you, Hilda? Oh, and Duana Johnston Virgo, I think she's, there she is. So if anyone, so if anyone needs any help, please feel free to reach out to those 4 folks. At this time, I'd like to invite Elder Charlotte Manuel to speak.
I carry this stick for all the children of the 4 directions. I was honored to stick by Carmen McKay when I was teaching young children how to sing, dance, and storytell. This is Walking Eagle. He likes to come out and enjoy everything. He always looks around. This is how I work with the children with this stick. So I carried and honor them. But first of all, I want to lay tobacco down and have a moment's silence for all the children all across Canada and the US, wherever our children were buried by the schools and wherever they were discovered or recovered or found. Okay? So a moment's silence while I light tobacco for the children, please. Kúkpi7. I offer tobacco so that we can start in our homes to break the cycles of abuse that come from the residential school, that we can let go of addictions that create havoc in our homes and our communities. I offer tobacco for all the children of the 4 directions, so that we can all walk in peace together with each other and start that healing process, because we really need it for our people and our children that are yet to come. I honor children and I love children. I have lots of grandchildren. And the biggest thing, and I'm very sincere and honest about this, we really need to feel this in our hearts, in our homes, is to bring love back into it. Bring our Creator back into our homes and our communities. But the biggest gift is the gift of forgiveness to ourselves, and everything else will fall into place for others that need to be forgiven. That is the gift that the Creator of all gave to us, the gift of forgiveness. Because if He didn't give us that gift of forgiveness, none of us would be standing here today. And I sincerely honor that gift of forgiveness. My children have taught me how to love myself. When I left that school up there, I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't know how to love my children. My 5 children taught me how to love them. Thank God for my grandmother. She went to school up here. Thank God for my mother, my auntie. They took me under their wing and raised me. They brought me back to my native spirituality. And that's what I believe in today. No disrespect to what other people believe, because I was taught to respect what other people believed by my auntie, my mom, and my grandmother. I was lost when I left from there, very lost. I didn't know anything. I was confused about what to believe in. I was taught the wrong way to believe in God in that school up there. Wasn't for my grandmother, my mom, my auntie, and a few other uncles that came into my life, and also Chief Leonard George came up, brought a bunch of runners up here to the school. I was sitting in a chair. He walked by and he blessed each one of us. He came to me and he made me stand up and look him right in the eyes. He put his hand on my head and on my shoulders. He said, now you have your native spirit, your Indian spirit back in with you. He said, I called it back for you. Now today, I'm a proud Secwépemc woman. 42 years of working on myself in sobriety and well-briety. I've worked hard on myself. I made lots of mistakes in my life. I own them. Nobody takes the blame for them. I blame myself for them. But I've learned to forgive myself for blaming myself for making mistakes. And I pray that we can have it in our hearts to start forgiving and start working and making that truth and reconciliation a path for all of us, for the children of the future, for the children of the past, for the children of now, the present. Let us start with that, please. I'm available anytime you need me. I will come out and I will help. And that is what I'm doing. I'm sitting on the 13 families. I enjoy going to those meetings. I come Tuesday, Wednesday. Tuesday we have a drumming circle, bringing that culture back into the community. I enjoy it. Wednesday we go do recording. And do we have lots of fun when we get together. One day I broke down and I had a meltdown right in front of the group. They sat there and let me cry because they knew I was hurting. And after we finished, they all come and give me a hug. So I believe in my native spirituality simply because I got married in the church, and the church told me, you don't belong in here anymore. I said, okay, fine. I couldn't understand why the church wouldn't allow me to go to church. So I left and went back to my native spirituality, and since then I've been happy and my heart's been filled with a lot of belief. And our native spirituality does exist. Believe me, it does. The ceremonies are still taking place, and be strong. Walk your talk and talk your walk, and believe in yourself. I am a proud Secwépemc woman, and I say, Kúkpi7 Kúkpi, Kúkpi7 Kúkpi, Kúkpi7 Kúkpi, Kúkpi7 Kúkpi. Thank you, all my relations. Ho-ho.
Kúkpi7 Kúk, Elder Charlotte Manuel. I would now like to invite Vicki Manuel to share her perspective.
Thank you. Like elders, chief, council, prime minister, visiting leadership, community. Any words I speak are not intended to harm or to hurt anybody. These are the truths as an intergenerational survivor. Since the age of 5, I feel like I have been in survivor mode, and I'm 53 years old now. It has been a long road. I was raised by my mom, and throughout my life, other family members. I'm the youngest of 5 children. I have 3 older brothers and 1 older sister. My mom went to residential school. My 3 oldest siblings went to day school here at KIRS. By the time my brother Kirby and I were old enough to go to school, it closed, but we still experienced the atrocities imposed onto my mom, my siblings, and other family members in other ways. We hear about the loss of culture and the loss of our language, but as children growing up in the wake of the residential school era, we lost so much more. We lost our parents. Our moms, our dads grew up in an institution, a regulated, cold institution that forced through violence not to have feelings. Our parents were not able to freely show love or emotions. We lost our ability to know how to parent or to be a parent. Parented by an institution, our parents were only able to parent with what they knew or were taught at residential school. We lost our fathers, our dads. There are no father figures in my family. My mom, myself, my daughters, and my granddaughter, 4 generations without a father figure. Our fathers are lost due to addictions, due to the inability to parent or to know how to parent. They have not done their healing, therefore they have issues establishing positive, respectful, and loving connections. We lost our siblings. As children, my siblings and I were separated to live among different family or community members. As a little girl, I had to leave my brothers and sisters who were my security blanket, my best friends, my protectors. As children, we lost a safe, secure, and loving childhood. Our childhood was filled with violence, addictions, and poverty. Wondering where we were getting our next meal and wondering if we could just eat potatoes for another month. Wondering if the butter knife in the door frame is enough to keep us safe from the predators on the other side. Growing up in a violent environment fueled by alcohol. As children, we became the adult, forced to grow up fast, forced to provide for ourselves to survive and to be safe. We became the parent we did not have. We lost our ability to have feelings except anger, and there was a lot of anger. We grew up in environments where feelings were not acceptable. We were not to show any weaknesses and absolutely no tears. We were taught to compress and stifle our feelings. We lost our loved ones to addictions, and in my family, they are lost to alcohol. In 2012, my nephew shot himself in the head. He had what I call liquid courage, alcohol to help him pull the trigger. 4 months later, my dad died of cirrhosis, an alcohol-related disease. The other day, I went and picked up my brother from detox, I believe for the 3rd time this year. We pray this time he calls his spirit back and he heals. My other brother is dying a slow death as he continues to battle the bottle on a daily basis. Our youth are experiencing the same alcoholic addictions among other drug addictions, and this worries me. We lost our innocence to sexual abuse. The sexual abuse our families experienced at residential school then creeped into our communities, and all innocence was lost. As such, we became hypervigilant, anxious, and always afraid. We rarely experience our family members dying of natural causes, old age. Our deaths are from addictions, overdoses, violence, suicides, chronic health conditions, and poverty. Growing up, we lost our sense of self. Going to town to attend a public school during the daytime and then coming back home to the res at night. 2 totally different worlds, and each trying to find our way, how we fit in and who we were. Mostly just trying to survive and to avoid the racism we felt at school. We learned how to shame each other from a residential school. The residential school was successful in instilling shame into who we are and then teaching us how to shame each other. This is not our Secwépemc way to shame, but one that we have inherited and are working on to rid. The children resting in the sacred burial grounds lost the ability to live their life. I feel it is our duty to live our best life in their memory. As much as we need to speak about the losses, the trauma, and the grief to heal, I feel it is just as important to speak to our successes and to leave you with a message of hope. My mom has been clean and sober for 42 years. She's helping to bring back our Secwépemc song and dances. My mom has taught me that it is okay to have and experience all feelings and emotions and that I am safe. My mom has an open door policy and a revolving door for my children and I, but to anybody in our community that needs an ear, a hug, a brushing off, or a safe place. My mom has lived in violence, been shamed, punished, but is healed, is healing, and has in her healing journey learned how to forgive. My mom is my hero. As for myself, I walk in two worlds, the Western world and the Secwépemc world, with my culture and my teachings grounding me in both. I have 2 university degrees under my belt. I have served on my council for my community for 6 years. I single-parented 3 amazing, kind, intelligent, and beautiful daughters, and all 3 have graduated. My home is a safe and loving space, and there's always food in the fridge. I continue to heal, and most importantly, I know who I am. I come from a long line of strong Secwépemc women. Every day I see sunshine and happiness for my granddaughter. We will continue to walk in 2 worlds with grace, ferocity, always grounded in our Secwépemc way of being. Every day I pray for the children and our healing. Kúkpi7.
He is Kúkpi7 Vicky. That was very inspirational. And now I'd like to invite Ashley Michelle to come and share some words with us today. I would like to mention that the Tk'emlúps Language and Culture Department, we have all got a ribbon vest for the men and ribbon skirts for the ladies, all made by Ashley Michelle. I'd just like to raise my hands to her for the wonderful job that she did for our department.
I just wanted to say thank you, Ted Gottfredson, Kukpi and counselors for letting me speak today. Come here, baby. Sorry, I just need a moment. Oh, yeah. Mr. Trudeau, there's a lot I want to say, but you don't know me. My voice may shake a little and I'm crying, but I need you to listen and I want you to hear my voice. My name is Ashley. I'm a proud Indigenous mother, and I come from a long line of strong, independent, successful Secwépemc women. I am hurting. My heart aches for the mothers who never got to see their babies again. My heart aches for the children who were scared and lonely and just wanted to go home but didn't make it. My heart aches for the children who were robbed of their childhood, culture, language, and traditions, some of who are sitting around you here today. Because of what happened, because of residential schools and the forced assimilation, colonization, and genocide of our people in Turtle Island, I am mourning for our language, culture, and traditions that I am so desperately trying to reclaim and teach my daughter before it's too late. I want a good life and future for her and the future generations to come. A good future means a life where she is not grieving, where she is not triggered. Our kids do not need to feel this pain, and it stops with my generation. I want our children to have a future where their voice is heard, where they don't have to worry about being another statistic, where our people are safe and MMIWGT2S is no more, where our children have clean drinking water, where they don't have to defend their sacred traditional land, where our children are not removed from their families and communities and placed in care, where Indigenous mothers can have their babies peacefully without worrying if their newborn child will be taken away, where our children can successfully walk in 2 worlds and practice our culture, tradition, language, and have healing. After everything, our babies, the missing, deserve to be found, identified, and brought home. Our children deserve a good future, and our families deserve peace. So how do we get there? We need more than words and broken promises, Mr. Trudeau. We need action, we need justice, and we need accountability. Listen and learn from our elders and survivors while they are still here. Ask for their knowledge and advice to move us on a path forward. Use your power and privilege for good and make this visit count. Visit count. Kúkpi7.
That's why we're still here.
Yes, Kúkpi7. Powerful words. They're examples of why our people are still here. Very good examples. Yes, Kúkpi7. At this time, I'd like to call upon Kúkpi7 Casimir. She's going to we're at that part, right? She's going to recognize the recognition of T-test Secwépemc witnesses from other nations and all survivors.
Excellent, Kúkpi7 for that. I just wanted to take this time and this opportunity to recognize and to also honor all those who came to witness from other nations as well. And to our survivors and to our intergenerational survivors and our youth that are also present with us today. And also to recognize Tk'emlúps being the home campfire of where it all began. And truly appreciation and outpouring love for all of you coming out to support, to embrace all those who came to our community to support us. And for the nation to come together like it has, and the renowned support that we've reached from around the world. And I know that we couldn't have done it without our Tk'emlúps membership, our nation representatives who came to our community to support, and everyone who stood up for each other in solidarity and unity. So I just wanted to say Kúkpi7 to all. Kúkpi7.
I'd like to introduce the short school video. I believe it'll play on the screen over there. It is called We Won't Forget You.
Walk the path to Shuswap nation. The future is in our hands. It may take some patience. It is our home, it is our land.
In a lifetime we'll celebrate who we are like every day. There's so much knowledge in the way we live our lives, so we're giving thanks. We won't forget you.
generations we balance by showing our voices. We got the talent. This is the start of a new life. We'll undo the wrongs and we'll choose right. Our home is here and it is so bright. We see the rivers will never lose sight. Bringing back the traditions, we sing the rap for the mission. The destination is living in innovation for the children.
In a lifetime we will celebrate who we are like every day. There's so much knowledge in the way we live our lives, so we're giving thanks.
We won't forget you. We won't forget you. We were sitting in the dark, now we're letting in the light. Oh, Kukpi, found love, now everything is fine. You were sitting in the dark, now we're letting in the light. Our school's a place we go. We feel safe and we feel better again. A home away from home. We're happy here and to be together again. You've shown there's always hope when tough times get you down. Let us begin and walk the longest road. We are here with you. We'll never forget. No, no, no. No, no, no. We'll never forget. Never forget. Never forget. We won't forget you. We won't forget you. You were sitting in the dark, now we're letting in the light. Oh, Kukpi, found love, now everything is fine. You were sitting in the dark, now we're letting in the light. You were sitting in the dark, now we're letting in the light. You were sitting in the dark, now we're letting in the light.
Okay, Kúkpi7. These are the students from Secwépemc. Okay, Kúkpi7. These are the students from Secwépemc. It's no accident that our people named our school Secwépemc. For our people, since time immemorial, Secwépemc has been our teacher. He's taught us how to live upon this land, how to live with each other. So it was no accident that our school was named Secwépemc. At this time, the Secwépemc School is going to be singing an honor song for our survivors and for those who did not make it through the residential school. At this time, I believe Sunny is going to lead the children and help them with the Secwépemc honor song. All right. Yes, Kukpi7. Wonderful job. Wonderful job. How about another round of applause for Scalep? Wow, we're right on schedule. So at this time, I'd like to call upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to offer some remarks.
Wait. Good afternoon. Thank you, Kúkpi7 Casimir, and everyone here today for welcoming me to Tk'emlúps. Thank you to the elders. Thank you to the kids who just sang for us and inspired us. Thank you to all of you who came out today. Thank you, National Chief Archibald, Regional Chief TG, and Chief Christian, along with all the other leaders here this afternoon. It's good to see you. I'm sorry I wasn't here on September 30th. It was a mistake, and I understand that it made a very difficult day even harder. You didn't have to invite me back. I know that. Well, thank you for doing so. I'm honored to be with you all in this moment. Merci pour votre accueil aujourd'hui. To the survivors who shared their powerful, moving, heartbreaking stories, I have heard you. To the families, to this community, I am listening to what we need to do and to make amends as a country. Earlier today, I went with Kukpi7 Casimir to pay my respects to the graves of the Secwe, the children who went missing. No child should ever have been taken from their home and forced into the residential school system. No child should ever have been taught that their language, that their culture, that their identity has no value. It is unacceptable that this was done to your children. It is inexcusable that you and your families had to live through such horrors. I hear you when you say that not only words, but actions are the way forward. You remind us that the healing path happens when those responsible, when Canada takes real action to make amends. We will be working with you on what you've said the community needs, from funding the Healing Center, to working with you on an Elders Lodge, to continuing to get answers and closure, and ensuring the proper commemoration to help the community and so many others grieve and heal. And all across the country, we will continue to walk this shared path of truth and reconciliation. Because what I've heard here, what I've heard from so many others, is that this is not a burden for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit to carry alone. This is the truth of what happened to you. But it is not just your story. It is the story of Canada. It is all of our story. And it is all of our responsibility to know, to learn, to understand, and to walk the forward path together. As I said earlier, at the same time as that residential school and the hundreds of others across the country were teaching children that they had no value because they were Indigenous, teaching them that their language had no importance, that their culture was worthless, teaching them that they themselves were worthless. Every other school in this country was teaching the same things to every non-Indigenous school child in this country. That's how systemic racism happens and continues. That the intolerance and racism and colonial mindset that was present in schools generations ago through this country contributed to building systems and institutions, and yes, a country that values Indigenous lives, Indigenous kids, Indigenous people less. Not actively in the hearts of every individual, but through systems and habits of governance and leadership and institutions that do not understand or respect the values and traditions that have created this incredibly strong identity that we celebrate today, that you celebrate and share with us. Those strong Secwépemc women, 3 generations, 4 generations who came to share their truths, to challenge, to demand better, to recognize the loss not just of the abuse of residential schools, not just the trauma passed along through generations, not just the weakening of language and cultures, the breaking of chains that stretched back tens of thousands of years of elders teaching next generations, growing bodies of knowledge and understanding, but taking away the very ability to be a parent, ability to show love to one's child. Something so basic that residential schools ripped out of this community, out of communities across the country, and left all of Canada weaker for it. Think for a moment how much stronger this country, all of us in this country, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, could be if non-Indigenous people had been able to learn alongside all of you the knowledge of this land, of countless summers and winters of discoveries, of understandings, of stewardship that we'd have as a country, had it not been for the wrong-headed colonial mindset, the racist ideology, the cultural genocide that tried very hard to take all of that away, not just from you, but from us. In 2015, as Chief Christian pointed out, I made a commitment just up the road here to true reconciliation. I made that commitment again a few months after that, during the 2015 election. And I think we all thought that the contrast from a government that over the previous 10 years had canceled the Kelowna Accords, ignored reconciliation, disrespected Indigenous people, that the contrast would be enough, that we'd be able to get things done quickly, that we'd be able to undo rapidly decades, generations, even centuries of institutional inertia. Progress has happened. Action has happened. And I know my friends on this stage know that very well, but not nearly enough. Yes, as a government, we move forward to recognize and are implementing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Yes, we move forward with historic legislation on protecting and supporting Indigenous languages. And Dr. Rawng Ignace, Shuswap Speaker, is the first Indigenous Languages Commissioner of Canada. That is progress and that is action, but there's more to do. Yes, over the past 3 years, we've been developing child and family services legislation so that kids at risk don't get removed from their communities into foster homes to lose their languages. And I was unbelievably pleased that when I visited Kúkpi7 First Nation a few months ago, we were able to sign the first Child and Family Services Agreement that took kids out of the provincial system in Saskatchewan to keep them in their community in Kúkpi7. And we're going to continue on that action. The federal government has turned over all of the records we have for residential schools to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation in Winnipeg. When it comes to the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School, for example, we have full or partial records going back to the late 1800s. Everything but the first 2 years this school was in existence. And if there's more, we'll work to find it. And if there's other organizations like the church that have it, we will stand by you and make sure that we get that information too. Because we can't have reconciliation without truth. We have work to do. And yes, the government has a lot of work to do. And recognizing the hard work that you have done is not a way of saying that we don't have even more work to do. We have a lot of catching up to do on the work that you have already done. And I take that on directly and personally. But let us not forget that what took generations and centuries to break can never be fixed overnight. Not if it's going to last. Not if it's going to respond to the challenge and the promise that Ashley made of giving a better future to her daughter, of drawing on the strength of her grandmother and her mother to be able to provide a better future. And that's on all of us in this country. And that's the realization that Canadians have taken on following the leadership right here in Tk'emlúps at Discovery in May of 215 plus Indigenous kids in the graves just up the hill. This is what Canada is. And that realization came as a real shock to an awful lot of non-Indigenous Canadians. We love to tell stories of ourselves as being this great, open, tolerant nation. We compare ourselves with smug smiles to the news coming out of the United States, and we say, oh, isn't Canada great and open? And I think these past months have been an awakening for many Canadians to the reality. And it's easy to get shocked and outraged and say, well, that has to change. We have to fix it. Somebody ought to do something. and as much as the federal government needs to do, and as much as the federal government needs to do much more, it's on all of us across this country, and specifically not only on Indigenous Canadians across the country. It's on non-Indigenous schools and universities. It's on orders of government, from municipal to provincial as well as federal. It's on our artists, our musicians, our dreamers, our business people, our banks, our teachers, our moms and dads. Everyone across this country has a role to play in reconciliation. That doesn't mean everyone has to get it right all the time. God knows we're all going to be making mistakes as we figure this out. But we need to keep at it. And let us not throw up our hands and say, because there remain boil water advisories in this country, nothing has been done. It's a poignant example, but it's one that we see all the time, where you will hear all the time that this government has failed to eliminate all boil water advisories in this country. You're right. We set ourselves a goal to do that within 5 years. And when we took office in 2015, there were 109 or 105 long-term boil water advisories. We've now eliminated 118 long-term boil water advisories, with about 50 remaining to go. But for the first time ever, there is an action plan and a project lead and a path forward in each and every one of those 50 remaining boil water advisories. So as you, as Indigenous people and leaders, and as non-Indigenous Canadians, look and challenge us all to do more on reconciliation, let us remember that it is urgent and important, and we have to keep working on it, but we cannot let challenges or things that are more difficult than we expected cause us to throw up our hands. The kind of strength of leadership that perseveres over years and generations. Wayne, you're talking about my dad and your run-ins with him back in the early 80s. There is a lot of work to do, and I think of my dad as well. It was his birthday today, and my 14-year-old son's birthday as well. They share a birthday, which is a pattern in our family, but oh well. But the work that we need to do goes beyond what we need to do today and tomorrow. What we have an opportunity to do together now, to set this country on the right path, to do the hard work, the heavy lifting of making those actions concrete, of stepping forward, of building new schools, of funding health centers, of funding elders' lodges, of declaring museums, of creating historic sites. This is the work we have to do. And there is no one thing that's going to be a magic bullet. Nothing we can do is going to erase the intergenerational trauma that lingers, that manifests itself in thousands of different ways across the country, from community to community. But everything we do together can make things slightly better. And we build on that slightly better to make significantly better, and then much better. And suddenly, a generation from now, things are different. We will still look back on the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century as a time of darkness in the relationship between Indigenous Canadians, Indigenous people and Canadians. but we will also have successes to point to, because we can bend the curve. We can change the path into the future. And it is through honest, open dialogue and a commitment to work together and to find common ground, even though there's lots of things we'll disagree on. And that we remain committed, not just to the words, but to doing the hard work that'll get us there. C'est ça que nous devons faire. C'est ça le défi que nous avons en tant que citoyens, en tant que Canadiens, autochtones et non autochtones. Nous avons du travail à faire et nous allons le faire ensemble. There is no reconciliation without truth, just like there is no path forward for anyone unless it's a path forward for everyone. I am ready to keep listening and to keep learning as a partner on this shared journey. Thank you for inviting me, and through me, all Canadians, for being with you on this road to reconciliation. Kúkpi7. And just before I finish, I would like to present to Kúkpi7 Casimir a gift. It is a drum painted by Keith Morgan from the Gitxsan Nation of a hummingbird, a symbol of unconditional love, luck, friendship, and the enjoyment of life and the lightness of being. They naturally have the ability to soothe and heal, and despite their small size, are capable of flying great distances, symbolizing endurance and perseverance. I can't think of anything that symbolizes better the strength of this community and how we move forward together.
I just want to say Kúkpi7 for that and how much I appreciate that. And, you know, it's about creating that positive foot forward that we all must do, you know, for the unity and the work that has yet to be done. It's a huge path that's ahead of us when it comes to justice and accountability for our children. So I know that, and I recognize it, and I also recognize it's going to be a lot of work all the way around. I also recognize that, you know, there's going to be times when we take like 2 to 5 steps forward and we may have to step back 1 to 3, but we're going to continue moving that forward. We have to. We have to do it for our children. We have to do it for our future generations. But I too also have something that I also wanted to give to you as well. Just a small token for yourself. So this here is a little beaded teddy bear. It is a gift shaped from Secwépemc Child and Family Services Agency in support of the Tk'emlúps de Secwépemc and Secwépemc and the other children who will be found through stories from residential school stories throughout Canada. The orange shows support along with the Orange Shirt Day and recognition of the residential school survivors. The teddy bear represents the belief that every child deserves a teddy bear to love, to hold, and to share their secrets with. So from all of us at the Tk'emlúps de Secwépemc, that is for you. And in this box, I do have one of our Tk'emlúps de Secwépemc Pendleton blankets. This here blanket, this Pendleton blanket, is significant to the Tk'emlúps de Secwépemc. And this here blanket is a gift from council and our community, our survivors, our intergenerational survivors, our members of the Tk'emlúps de Secwépemc, to give to your son for his birthday, his 14th birthday. This is about our children, all of our children. And that is to show and express our gratitude for having you with us today, and this for your son. And he'll always be able to reflect what the significance of this blanket is and moving forward. And a part of history. Kúkpi7.
Thank you. Kúkpi7.
Kúkpi7, Prime Minister Trudeau, I would like to do some more housekeeping quickly before our closing prayer and our unity song. There's a media event happening immediately after this that everyone is welcome to witness. Each of the speakers, Prime Minister Trudeau, Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir, National Kukpi7 Rosanne Archibald, and Kukpi7 Wayne Christian. Each will be commenting on the day and answering questions. I would also like to ask for some patience as we accommodate the needs of Tk'emlúps School. The gates by the school will be closed from 2:15 to 2:45 to allow the Tk'emlúps students to safely leave the school. I would also like to remind you that mental health and traditional supports are available. There is also the IRSSS toll-free number if you do need help. Thank you to all who came to participate and bear witness. Now I would like to invite Ted Goffredson and Sunny Prairie Chicken to sing the Unity song, followed by Elder Steve Basil to for our closing prayer.
White Kukpi7. So it's actually the Language and Culture Department. We're going to sing the Unity song. This song is sung to bring our people together, to remind us to be one. We're all related. This song was taught to Sunny by an elder from Secwe, and it comes from the Tk'emlúps, which is the tiger lily. And if anyone has seen a tiger lily, the roots grow like hands coming together. So that's what this song symbolizes. The song does speed up and slow down to signify the different stages of our lives. Here's Kúkpi7. At this time, we'd like to call Elder Steve Basil to Tk'emlúps to finish us off with a closing prayer.
Kúkpi7 Rosanne Casimir. Kúkpi7 as Cleedens, being good sit Nalia, as Colmeendem, it's a mammal, as La as a wax, as a Colmeendem, as actually yours. Every day when I wake up, I call on our ancestors to look after each and every one of us in a good way. Walk with us as they will and they do every day, no matter what. And each day they're there for us, no matter where we go, and all of the things that we do, all of the talks that we have. I want to thank the Tk'emlúps Chief Rosanne for allowing us to come here, inviting us all to be here today to talk. Also want to say that, you know, out of respect, the people in the communities and far and wide here wanted to be here today. I'm sure that we would have filled this Powell Harbor with thousands of people, but out of respect, they stayed where they are. They're watching on the live feed that we have here. So, Kúkpi7 Casimir, as you come in, why the Tk'emlúps, as the Tk'emlúps and Pusmans, as La as the Kúkpi7 as you yards, why the Tk'emlúps as you mean them, as the Kúkpi7 Ujum Pings, Ulmayaus, Kúkpi. Genoeg aan de why the Tk'emlúps as last and Lamans, as Tash Kenims, Tash Caps, Tash Kenims Lee Stemmies Wax. You come in with widest least, K'emlúps, as Tash Caps, Tash Kenims Lee, as your yards. Kúkpi, genoeg aan de Kúk en Pien Koetsies as a wax Nelia, and then the national. As agreement, widest least Stemmies choose, as your yards, Pushmans. As a stem, please, Samuel. As Trintam, Queesa, as a stem, please, Sammy. A Kúkpi, Knuchen, the Kúkpi, as a yacht. Each Kúkpi, why didn't Kúkpi? Thank you, all my relations. Kúkpi7.
So at this time, there will be, I'm sorry, is it called a media scrum? A media scrum, and unfortunately, Tk'emlúps School is being let out. For their safety, the gates have been locked, so if you could just kindly have some patience and wait for the gates to open by 2:45, the kids will all be on their buses and on their way. So once again, please, if you could wait here, visit with friends and family, that would be appreciated. Yes, Kúkpi7.
Please join me in thanking our amazing MCs today. Thank you so much to you, Ted, and to your daughter for exemplifying how it's never too late, too soon, too early to reclaim back our Secwépemc language, and we thank you so much for your service today. Given that we've had a lot of speaking, we're not going to go for comments from the dignitaries that are here today. We're going to go straight into question, and we already have a lineup forming, so if we could just get that ready for them as well. And as we did before, for those of you who are online, you can put your questions in the chat. We're going to get through as many as we can while we still have the Prime Minister with us and our other dignitaries. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Again, if you didn't miss it, the other thing I'd like to mention is if you asked a question in the earliest scrum, I'm going to skip over you. I will come back if we have time. So if you had a question earlier, you might as well just step back because we're going to give it to other people at this time for fairness. So I already see somebody over at the microphone, so we'll go right here on the microphone here, please. Thank you. So again, I know who you are, but for everybody else, could you please say who you are, who you represent, and one question, no follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina House, APTN National News. First of all, Kukpi7 Casimir, thank you for welcoming us into your traditional territory. All the other leaders on the panel, thank you so much for all your hard work for all of our people. Mr. Prime Minister, 6 years ago, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission offered recommendations for calls to action. The truth is that only 14 of the 94 have actually been followed through and completed. When will your government commit to a full, transparent opportunity for the government to fulfill all of those recommendations and truly make Indigenous people a top priority for your government?
Thank you. When the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out with its calls to action, I was the only party leader and Prime Minister who fully accepted all 94 recommendations, including those who we didn't have direct control over, for example, an apology from the Vatican. We did our part on that one, for example. In 2017, I went to the Pope and asked him to come to Canada to make an apology, and I know there's a delegation of Indigenous leaders heading over there shortly with the Canadian Council of Bishops to do that. But that's obviously one that is going to be filled or unfulfilled independently of the federal government. When it comes to those calls to action that the federal government has a role to play on, depends how you account for them, but I believe we are underway or having completed around 80% of them. There's still a lot more work to do, and we're going to continue to do it to make sure that we're fulfilling those calls to action as Canadians and Indigenous people expect us to.
Microphone, thank you. We're going to go take one from the chat. Marcella Bernardo from City News, 1130 Vancouver. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, please clarify how soon residential attendance records and other documents requested will be shared by the federal government and the Catholic Church. Prime Minister?
In regards to the federal government, all the federal records, all the records in possession of the federal government have already been turned over to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation in Winnipeg. We will continue to look to make sure that there are no others that we have remaining to turn over, but we have, in our understanding, turned over all of those records, including, for example, full or partial attendance records to the Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School dating back to the 1800s, with I think only the first 2 years of the existence of the school where we don't have any records at all. All of those are being held by the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation as the central repository for all those records. As people well know, we are working with and Indigenous leaders are working with the Catholic Church and other organizations to get them to turn over their records as well. But on the federal side, it is my understanding that we have already turned over all those records to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation.
Thank you. We'll go to a question on the floor, please. Please identify yourself.
Thank you so much. It's Angela Starrett from CBC News, also from the Kiksan Nation. Thank you so much, Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir, for inviting us here today. This question is for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The stated goal of the Indian residential school system was to kill the Indian in the child, which was also part and parcel of the colonial project of stealing Indigenous lands. Indigenous people have now won hundreds of court cases with respect to their rights and title, recognizing their rights and title, that your government continues to fight them on today. Does your reconciliation involve continuing to deny Indigenous people fair benefit from the vast wealth being generated from their lands?
No, reconciliation is about shared stewardship of this land, and that is something that we're very much focused on. Our desire is not to be fighting things in court. Our desire is to settle these treaties and come to understandings that respect and understand the inherent rights that were never signed away in many, many different cases. Engaged in a treaty process. That is why we are looking to resolve those. That is why I went to the Tsilhqot'in a number of years ago to forgive, or to exonerate the 6 chiefs that had been executed wrongly a century ago. There is much work to do, but reconciliation involves recognizing rights holders, recognizing the traditional territories that cover the entirety of this land, and figuring out ways to move forward so that Indigenous communities can once again be in control of their futures, both economically and in every other way.
We're going to go back to the floor again. As just a gentle reminder for everybody online as well as present here, we're only going to go with questions from those who did not have a chance yet at this time, as we have so many people already lined up. So please proceed, introduce yourself.
Thanks. It's Justine Hunter from the Globe and Mail. Questions to the Prime Minister. Your government shielded the Catholic Church. Thank you. Your government shielded the Catholic Church from paying full reparation to residential school survivors. Now that it's clear that the Catholic Church is not as destitute as they had made out, I'm wondering if you will reconsider and revisit that decision.
Sorry, just to be clear, you're talking about the decision that was taken 6 days after we were sworn in?
Yes.
Yes.
But there's been new evidence around the amount of money that the...
We have seen, unfortunately, from the Catholic Church, a resistance to taking on responsibility, either financial or moral, for its role in residential schools, which is not the case for many other churches in Canada, the United Church and others that have taken extraordinary steps as partners on this path of reconciliation. I have to say, as a Catholic, I find it extremely difficult to see the Church resist asking for forgiveness and apologizing. It's supposed to be at the core of Catholic teachings. There is obviously an ongoing dialogue with the Canadian Council of Catholic Bishops, and Indigenous leadership involved as well with the Vatican. And I think that the millions of Catholics like me across this country expect the Church to step up and fulfill its moral responsibilities, its legal and economic responsibilities, its historic responsibilities, but also to practice what it quite literally preaches.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the floor.
Georgie Smythe from CBC News, The National. Prime Minister, your government accepted the findings of missing and murdered Indigenous women. They accepted that report as genocide. You don't use that word to describe what happened at residential schools. Why?
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out in its report and referred to the frame as cultural genocide. I think there are many ways of looking at what happened, all of them evil. I don't think there is any limit on the strength of language and of horror that we need to use to look back at what happened in the past, but also to acknowledge the impact on the present and make sure with everything we have that it doesn't continue to impact upon the future. When we look at the intergenerational trauma, when we look at the mental health outcomes, the economic outcomes, the general health outcomes of Indigenous peoples, we understand that this legacy of residential schools remain as potent today as ever. And that's what we have to commit ourselves today and every day to changing.
Thank you. We'll go again to the floor.
Mackenzie Gray with CT. On the first...
Sorry, can you just repeat that again against the...
We good? Yeah, hi. Mackenzie Gray from CTV, Mr. Trudeau. On the First Nations child welfare case today, you said that your government hasn't made a decision on if you'll appeal it, but you said that victims will be compensated. The tribunal said in 2019 that each victim should receive $40,000. So since you've said that you're going to compensate victims, will you commit that your government will give a minimum of $40,000 to all of those victims?
When the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal decision came down in 2019, we immediately said that we would be there to compensate kids who suffered being taken from their communities, taken into care over the past years. That has never been a question for this government. And yet, in 2019, we appealed because we had concerns about what that ruling actually meant and what it implied. Because I think people understand that, yes, even as we must compensate people for harm suffered in the past, we must also, as a government, as a country, as communities, put an end to the behaviors that caused harm that would later need to be compensated. We need to change the system around child and family services. We need to make sure that Indigenous kids who are at risk don't get removed from their language, from their culture, from their communities, from their identity, because that ends up causing as much long-term harm as anything else. And that is our focus as we look at the latest ruling around the CHRT and the decision we have to make whether we appeal or not appeal. But there is no question there will be compensation for people who suffered at the hands of child and family services. The question as to levels of compensation and who gets what, those remain to be understood, negotiated, worked through. But allow me to be clear yet again. There will be compensation for people who suffered because they were removed from their communities for child and family services.
Thank you. From the floor, please.
You gotta get closer. Hello, everyone. My name's Kukpi Frank Antoine from Bonaparte's First Nations. My question to you, personally, I would love you to apologize to my mom and to my elder Diane for not being here. They're the ones who are suffering, not us. We have to take what they have, and we are here today for them. They are the survivors. They're the ones that need to be apologized to. Thank you, Kukpi Rosanne, for bringing them here today, and the leaders. Like you said, Wayne Christensen. Thank you, Mom. She's here today. I don't have my dad here, but my mom is here. 1943 to 1956, she was up there. And she's here today, and thank her being here today, I wouldn't be here. So as a leader in my community, we would like to thank you. Use your words wisely, but use them rightfully, please. Because I would love you to apologize to these two ladies and the rest of our elders in our community and all the people that suffered in residential schools. So Kukpi7.
Kukpi7, for your question, for your leadership, Kukpi. I apologize. I should have been here with you. I am sorry I wasn't. Thank you for being here today, and thank you all of you for sharing and for allowing me to participate with you. Kukpi7.
Thank you. At this time, we are going to have to excuse the Prime Minister as he does need to move. We will keep the media scrum open for a little bit longer for our other dignitaries, but at this time, we raise our hands to you. Prime Minister, for joining us today, and I think you've been on the hot seat for a while yet as well for these questions, and what a way to finish that round of questions, and it was my honor to witness that.
The right people have that number.
So again, if there's any further questions at this time, it will be directed to those who have spoke today, whether it is online or here in person. The microphone is over here. I know we've had quite a day already, but please feel free to approach the microphone. We'll just give a minute for the Prime Minister to say his goodbyes. And for everybody here today, I thank you so much for your cooperations, as it was a little bit different today between the porta potties and other aspects that we had to take into consideration. We thank you for that. Almost done. Almost done. Just take it. Almost. So I see Neetu from Global News. BC does have further questions to our remaining dignitaries, so please go ahead, Neetu. And just pardon me, I should make that clear for anybody who has asked questions prior. We will open up again to whomever wishes to ask a question. We're no longer counting how many you got in right now. We'll just see everybody's paying attention, and please proceed. Neetu, again, Neetu Global News, and who are you directing your question to?
Thank you so much. I'm actually hoping to direct it to all three chiefs on the stage, if I may. I know you're probably cold and you've been sitting up there for quite some time, but here we are. The Prime Minister is making his way out. He's made the remarks and had the meeting that you have long been asking for. I'd like to get your impressions on what you thought of today's meeting, which started with a reminder of the Prime Minister's lack of presence on September 30th and ended with an exchange of gifts and apologies. What did you think of today? We'll start with you, Kukpi Rosanne, if we could.
Thank you for that question. It is a very good question of what I thought of that. You know, knowing where we were September 30th and even prior to, extending those invitations. And, the meaning behind it, when it came to our elders, our survivors, our intergenerational survivors, and for the Secwe, the missing. And so, I know that today, giving us all this time that we had to, have an intimate meeting, with just our TTS members was definitely a crucial step. And, having the time and the opportunity to listen to them and their truths, and to visit the Secwe, the missing, the sacred site for the first time was very, very impactful. And, today, this afternoon, extending, his commitment to continue working with us, in a good way, and that, we want that commitment. We want justice and we want accountability. All our levels of government needs to work together. All of us, First Nations government, as well as the provincial and the federal government. And so it's going to be a lot of hard work working together. So, I'm leaving it as I have my hope out there. And, it's always something I always hold on to. And, I do believe in people, and I do believe there's a lot of good in people. And for me, I have to believe, because I need to know that we are truly making a difference for our children and our future generations.
Chief Wayne, I would love to hear from you as well.
This way.
Mike, hello. Neetu, thank you for that question. My impression, honestly, is one of frustration and anger. I'll be honest, because politicians have a tendency, especially when there's big media type things, to say what they think the public wants to hear. He did not say anything that I saw as concrete steps forward, specifically around the legal issues. Canada has been fighting our people in courts for children, legal title. There was Wet'suwet'en up north as an example, or in a conflict with them and around title. And so, but Canada continues to proceed down that road. And I think that Canada and this Prime Minister, if he's truthful and honest with himself and the cabinet, they need to take a legal strategy on reconciliation. Specifically for the children, stop fighting our kids in court. Stop continuing to steal our land through the process they've set out. Stop taking our resources. But most importantly, I think, is to reinvest in the reconstruction of the things that Canada destroyed. Our language, our families, healing, those things that are important. If he's really serious about doing something, then he needs to do something that's concrete around the legal stuff, because that's what drives everything. Because unfortunately, Canada still doesn't know that the Indian Act is still actively in action right now. There are sections in the Indian Act that speak specifically to children going to school. They're still there. So I think that if he's serious about reconciliation, then he needs a legal strategy to make reconciliation happen. And he needs to hear us in his cabinet. We need to be there. We need to make our case in front of his government. And that's the only way it's going to happen. Because the end of the story with this, in a minority government, he'll be here maybe 2 years, maybe 3. We have a short window of opportunity. So I call upon all the chiefs across Canada to really think about that, what we need to push this federal government to do. That's my impression. I've got other words, but I won't say here. I was gonna joke, and I got a text came back to me, and we were joking. We should make him do 100 Hail Marys. But I thought, no, that's kind of rude. Anyways, but yeah, I think we really need to think the legal strategy around reconciliation, and I thank you for the question.
Chief TG, if I could.
Yeah. Hello. Good question, and I think, when we're talking about reconciliation, and I'm glad everybody on the internet and survivors here witnessed what Prime Minister Trudeau said today. So, as our national chief said, there's a level of accountability here. So we're going to hold him to his words. And I think, as Kukpi said, first of all, quit fighting us in court. Our children are in court. There is an appeal that was just brought forward. It was dismissed. And there was over 20 Canadian human rights tribunals where this federal government hasn't lived up to. So as we move forward, it's going to be actions speak louder than words. It's more than just coming here and apologizing. We know that Trudeau he's good at politics. He's good at theatrics. He's good at empty promises, but to move beyond that, we need action, and part of it is what was said here by Kukpi7 Rosanne Casimir is provide the resources, release the information, help us find the information from the churches, and it is provide healing centers, not only here but elsewhere in this province that can really alleviate a number of issues that we're dealing with. I mean, look at this year. We're dealing with a pandemic. We're still dealing with the opioid crisis. Here was central in terms of the wildfires because of climate change. And there's a massive homelessness issue that we're all dealing with, not only in First Nations communities, but municipalities. So 4 emergencies that he could move on right away. So I think it's actions speak louder than words. I think many survivors and many Indigenous peoples and leaders are tired of empty words. We need to see action. Thank you.
And Chief Archibald, thank you.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say to you, I really appreciated watching your interview with the Prime Minister, where during the campaign, it was one of my favorite media moments. And what happened today and this event, I'm a guest here, and I was invited here by Kukpi7 Rosanne and her council. And This event is for the community, it's for the survivors, and it was to apologize for him not being here after 2 invitations, and he did that several times. And he also directly apologized to the 2 survivors that came up with Kukpi7. And so that, to me, I think was absolutely necessary. And I'm grateful that he has acknowledged that he did make a mistake. And I agree with all of the speakers on this question that words are really great. And I had a few moments where I could talk to the Prime Minister, just lean over and talk to him, and wanted to reiterate to him that actions are what we need. We need to see actions. This government, and I should say the Canadian government, for the last 150 years or more that they've been in existence, have spent billions of dollars trying to destroy our communities. They have spent, they've created these institutions of assimilation and genocide. They have stolen our lands. They have taken resources without proper compensation, and that has to stop. And so we are looking for those concrete actions moving forward. And I did let the Prime Minister know that there is a healing path forward. And I want him to walk that healing path with us. And part of that is to make those investments in rebuilding our communities, in rebuilding our families and our, the safety of our children. The government has to make significant investments to repair the damage that they have done with their genocidal policies and legislation. And so that's the path ahead. The healing path forward is not, kumbaya and la, 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 and let's walk this path together. It's about reparations. It's about action. And we expect that moving forward. And we're going to work in a collaborative and cooperative way on that, and do so with kindness and love for one another. So thank you for your question.
Thank you very much. We're going to go take one from our chat, and then we're going to go back to the floor. It's from Levi Laundrie from Info News. Tk'emlúps, Kúkpi7 Casimir. Are you satisfied that after meeting with the Prime Minister today, that the concrete action Tk'emlúps is seeking will be met by the federal government, like, for example, the Healing Center for Survivors? Kukpi Rosanne.
Thank you for asking that question, Levi. We did send a letter to the Prime Minister, and, for us, first and foremost, sharing the disappointment of not responding to the invitations, but also including in there the importance of healing and what that looks like moving forward. We also put in there with the Healing Center and just how much it is needed, more so now that, since we announced the findings of our missing children in unmarked graves. And so it's extremely important for all those who've been triggered, not only here from Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc, but throughout our nation as well. It has had a huge impact on everyone. So that Healing Center is absolutely crucial.
Thank you. We'll go back to the floor.
Kristen Holiday from Castanet News. Kukpi Rosanne, along with the Healing Center, an Elders Lodge and a museum were also things that came up today. Can you speak about any plans for those in the future?
Those are just equally as important. I'll go to the Elders Lodge first. The Elders Lodge is extremely important, especially when we have so many of our members who are aging. We have so many of our members throughout Secwépemc who are also aging. We need an Elders Lodge to be able to assist individuals to, live at home for as long as possible within our community where it's culturally safe where their families are from, and where they've been rooted since they were born. And it's also extremely important to know that, we're going to be working with the resources, whether it be through Shaw, whether it be through Thompson Rivers University, to have the educational component as well, to be able to support all the positions that it's going to take to run. And it's also about being able to give our elders the dignity to be living at home with assisted daily living supports in place, right through to the extended care. And so with the museum, it's about remembering and always remembering who we are and where we came from. It's also remembering, and ensuring that we can house our artifacts. We can house our museum in a place where we can pass on from generation to generation. And, right now to this date, we do have artifacts that are held within a New York museum that are still waiting to come home. So that is something that we want to see and be able to have and house here, and not only for TTS, but for the nation as well.
One second. We'll take a question back from the floor.
Kukpi Rosanne, we heard a number of apologies from the Prime Minister today. I'm curious if your conversation earlier this morning, if you feel as though you accept this apology, and do you think that you are going to have that working relationship that you'd like to have moving forward?
Excellent question. I'm a true believer that actions will speak louder than words. And today, there was action. He was here. He flew over on his son's birthday to be here to make that first step. So I'm hopeful. And, I did accept his apology. And, for me, it's about our survivors. It's about all of us who've been impacted.
Thank you. I'm just going to address one question that came up in the feed about the documents that the Tk'emlúps is still waiting for on the Catholic Church and possibly Ottawa. After the Prime Minister, they already shared documents dating back to the 1800s. That statement was in regards to those documents that were shared with the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. If you notice me on my phone, that was me phoning Tk'emlúps Legal Counsel to confirm where we're at. And we know that some documents have been shared, but we don't have more to say at this time. So I just wanted to make that clear. We'll go to a final question on the floor.
Well, with regards to the 215 that passed many years ago, I am quite curious I am quite curious, as with probably most of BC, as to how many of these children were born and would have been this day hereditary chiefs out of all the ones that have passed. I'm just curious as to when all is said and done as to whom they are and where they are from.
Thank you for that question. For us, it's about accountability, and it's also about justice. And along that path, that's what our work ahead of us is. And that's to find the truth of who the children are, the families that they're from, and to either memorialize and or repatriate to bring them back to their homes. So it is a long path ahead.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Thank you very much, everybody. That is a wrap on our media event and our entire day. I would just like to coordinate a little thing while I have a microphone, and that is Sen Zhang and also Roy Christopher for an interview. If you have not met each other, I'd like to make sure that you do. I want to thank Kukpi Christian, National Chief Archibald, and Kukpi Rosanne for staying for the end of the questions. Again, Sen Zhang and Roy Christopher, the survivor, I'd like to introduce you both so that you can get on with your interview at this time. And thank you. Kúkpi7.